this recording that we upload to our YouTube channel. But now the most important person today is Ludovica Galeazzo, and I'm very pleased to have you here. Just around the corner from Padua, actually. So she is an associate professor for architectural history at University of Padua, and has just received or started an ERC grant, and is a PI of Venice's Nissology. So what this is, you will explain to us, so those who haven't read the abstract yet. And her research focused on Venetian architecture in the early modern period with a special interest in the application of new technologies. So that's why you are extremely welcome, even more here to our center, and to demonstrate the process of the city's change over time. And I think that's what you will be talking about shortly. After her PhD, she held postdoc positions at various institutions, so at UF University here in Venice, at Duke University, also university we love to collaborate in various levels. And you were a fellow at ITATI, the Harvard University Center for Italian Renaissance Studies. Yeah, and you are going to talk about your ERC project, and the title of your talk is Cities and Urban Change, Mapping and Modeling Historical Transformations in a Geospatial Infrastructure. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much. And yeah.
Let me turn the camera over me. I think it's fine. Well, thank you very much, first of all, to Director Franz Fischer, to Stefano Dandaglio, who are now connecting on Zoom, and to Benedetta Bassi for having me here today. It's really my great pleasure to be here, and especially to see so many people today, and also online. So I feel this huge responsibility, but I'm also particularly happy to see young people, because this is a sign to me that digital humanities are growing in terms of a tool necessary for any kind of research, especially in the humanities. This is something that was not true when I started more than 10 years ago. It was something very difficult to communicate. So at that time, the digital tool technologies were looked at something just fancy, something that was good for communicating the research in a different way. Now I think that we are demonstrating that actually they are a tool that is an integral component of any historical research. So today, as Professor Fischer was saying, I will talk about this project that started really just a month and a half ago. So it's at its early stages. It's a project that was awarded an ERC grant from the European Union for the next 5 years. It will be developed at the University of Padua in the Department of Health. Microphone open, I think. And in partnership with ITATI, which is the Upper University Center for Italian Renaissance Studies. And this project is about the lagoon of Venice. So it deals with the Nissology. So the title, as you see, is Venice's Nissology. So Nissology comes from Greek. So Nissos is the term for island, and it's really the study of the island. So the project is about a different way to study and visualize the very complex and layered history of this very peculiar site in terms of physical transformation, but also as the interweaving relationships that these different islands, it's a cluster of over 60 islands that form what we normally call the Venetian lagoon. So the project is focusing on a very broad time span, because it's going to start from the 16th century, the very moment in which the Republic consciously organized its territory, its sprawl water territory, till the very contemporary days, to the present days, because as you will see, this space, this very peculiar environment has changed so much. And the idea is how we can communicate the urban transformation. And I'm really happy to discuss with you about this topic and how it also has evolved in my own personal career and path. Because what the critical concept that lies behind this project is the idea of the city as a sort of fickle organism, as an amoeba, and this is a brilliant expression that I just stolen from Professor Caroline Bruselis, is something that continuously evolved, changed, expanded, as did the buildings, inhabitants, practices. So one of the chief obstacles of disciplines that are dealing with the urban change is to map not only the tangible heritage, so the architecture, the physical space, but how we can communicate a space that has changed in terms of social practices, political institutions and actions, everyday life. And so this series of pictures are some of the outputs that my team and I was involved for since 2010 in this international research group called Visualizing Venice. Now it's called Visualizing Cities because we are also growing in terms of geography. For many years, we focused on the way in which we could describe and visualize the transformation of the space as an ongoing flow. But what we were missing, I think, at that time was really the idea of telling a story that is not only made of buildings, of their own story. And this is why, for me, and I think most of you are maybe art or art historian, we tend to fragment sometimes our analysis and to focus only on the tangible space. So with the project Venice, I'm trying to overcome this issue with the idea of studying and visualizing in an interconnected way the physical and functional dimension of a city, and to look at the lagoon of Venice as really a complex set of human, material, spatial, and physical relationships. So the idea is how we can communicate and visualize the relationship between Venice and what I love to call the aquascape. This sort of periphery made of small lands of varying size spread all over more than 550 square kilometers. So it's a very huge space. Looking at it is really a network, an archipelago actually would be the correct term, because what we have faced today, I think, is a sort of Venice-centric vision in which Venice was seen as the capital who dominated the Mediterranean Sea, without really considering what its periphery. There are so many studies, it's quite obvious to say, but so many studies that are focusing on Venice or either on the domain in the Mediterranean, like the islands in the Aegean, or in the mainland. But it's sort of absurd that we are missing what is in between these spaces. So it would be like looking to a city, a regular city, without considering its periphery. This is exactly what the historiography has done till today. So the idea is really to shift our attention just from Venice to look at this archipelago of islands that is a sort of core an integrated system of calculated political, territorial, and cultural interactions between the city and the islands. And this is a condition that unfortunately is not longer visible today, because most of the islands, and again, we are talking about more than 60 islands, are completely abandoned and completely detached also from the city center in a physical way, but also in a mental way. What we have lost, and you see here some pictures that showing the then and now. So this is the condition of many of the islands, while till the very end of the 18th century, there were very important religious complexes mainly. What we have lost today is not only the architectural heritage, so the urban space, but also the perception of the lagoon as an integrated network of islands that were really helping and sustaining the city of Venice. So the fall of the Republic in 1787 had profoundly alterated the system. So places that, with the conversion of these islands for to spaces that were used for military purposes mainly, so architecture and religious complexes were transformed to accommodating warehouses, military hospitals, and troop quarters. And the link, the very strong link that was between the islands and the city was interrupted. That was the moment in which something has profoundly changed. So how we can communicate this change in terms of function, activities, and the everyday practices that were used till the 18th century, while today we have just basically the desert or nothing more. And in contrast to today, this idea of thinking within an archipelago was very well understood in the early modern period. And this is why, for me, it's also sort of ethical action what I'm trying to do with this project, because I really would like to promote this space, because there is nothing that I can do as an architectural historian. I mean, I'm not in the administration, I'm not the mayor of this city, so it's really difficult for me to try to fix the problem in terms of restoration or something like that. But at least I can try to preserve the idea of this space. And what you are looking right now is a miniature that I think really represents the archipelago and the sort of DNA of this city. It's a miniature from Ptolemy's cosmography of 1470. It's a miniature that really documents and embodies the physical and metaphorical ideas of the city at that time. Of course, it's a very simplified archipelago. You see, Venice is not so much recognizable in its shape, is formed by a series of islands connected by bridges. But all around, we have this sort of protective belt made of different islands that are just represented with the stylized church and a label. So the idea is, of course, to promote the city as a sort of artificial artifact, something that is floating miraculously in this sort of very calm and quiet lake. Of course, the situation at the time was absolutely different. The lagoon was also a very problematic environment, a very difficult environment in which you can live. But looking closer to this miniature, there are some elements that are really describing the distinctiveness of this space. And one is on the lower right corner. It's a cabana, so a shelter for boats. And this element is testifying to the use of the lagoon also in terms of shelter for welcoming people, especially fishermen and sailors, while they were crossing the lagoon. Of course, we are thinking in modern times, modern ideas of crossing the entire lagoon in a few hours, but actually at the time we were rolling, and so it was like days of navigation. On the other side, there is a mill, and so this element is testifying to the lagoon as a space that was also providing foodstuff for the city. In a city that is completely deprived of any agricultural space, how can you really supply the food and also the water? And in this case, and we'll show you a few other examples, one of the main problems of the city was how to grind the grain in order to create and to make the flour. So even in its simplicity, I think that this miniature is telling about the idea of the city as really a complex set of relationships and a network between this island. And so one of the major functions within these islands was, of course, to host religious communities. Those communities were the first one who inhabited this place well before the early modern period. That is, for me, the moment in which I started my project, only because I think that is with the 16th century that actually the Republic is structuring this territorial in a very calculated way. but the islands were hosted an impressive series of religious communities of very different orders. It's a sort of kaleidoscope of religious order, from Benedictine to Augustinian to Dominicans, Carthusian, and so on. And these spaces and these communities were not only important for spiritual reasons, but also because they were a fundamental part and component of the everyday life, for many different reasons. The first one is about the food supply, because within any precincts of these islands, where there were spaces for vineyards, for orchards, for veggie gardens, and these spaces must be open also for private citizens who could go there and have their own cultivation. So there was a complete, even for communities that were under the so-called clausura. So the idea was really of an exchange of activities between the islands and the city center. Still today, some islands like Sant'Erasmo, this is of course a drawing made in the 16th century, mid-16th century. So it's very difficult also to recognize this island because it has changed a lot. It grew over the centuries. But some islands like Sant'Erasmo and Vignole still today are very important for the food supply of the city. So we are going there to have the archos, for instance, that is one of the major products. Or some other islands like La Certosa. Now there is nothing more than the harbor with very luxury boats, but many other islands like the Certosa were also important for the vineyards. For instance, you see here the complex of the La Certosa with the minor cluster, the major cluster, and behind the religious space, there were all these very regular spaces for the vineyards. Again, we are talking of a very strict and rigid order in terms of clausura. So the fact that these islands were also used for state activities is something that the idea that we have in mind right now is something quite strange. Also, minor islands, and this is the island of San Giorgio, were used for some cultivation, in this case for the extensive cultivation of roses. You see here that there are some wooden pergolas, in which there was the cultivation of roses that were used for medicinal but also culinary use. We found many recipes made with the petals of roses. And again, minor islands like the one of San Secondo had quite big spaces dedicated to the veggie gardens and the orchards. I was talking at the beginning about the water mills, the mills. In this case, we have also a sort of proto-industrial activity, because what is represented here is a water mill, so-called accumulo. I think that this is one of the best examples of the creativity of Venetians at the time, because as I said before, before Venice could draw upon the rivers of the mainland, the problem was how to have enough energy, water energy, to ground the grain. And so they decided to exploit the tide, rise, and fall. So the water mills work more or less that way. They created a very large semicircular banking with a dam. They were waiting for the water to come in with the high tide, and then they closed the dam. They waited for the external water to go down, to fall. And then when there was the maximum increase or maximum difference between the two, they opened the dam. And so the energy and the movement of the water falling down the dam was making this four wheels that you see represented in here moving. And I think that here is really the creativity of a space that was so different from all the other cities you have in mind. So they really need to find something different and using the space that they have, in this case, the high and low tide. You see here a detail with the four wheels represented in here. But the interlocking exchange was not only about food. We had many spaces used also for the infrastructures and commodities that were really supporting the everyday life. So from shelters to boats, the cabana that I mentioned, to custom houses, powder magazines. Think about the fact that in the 1570 there was a huge fire in the arsenal. They realized, the public realized that it was not a good idea to keep the powder gun, the gunpowder within the city center. So they decided to move all this powder to the islands. And so they created this sort of powder magazines in order to keep and store the powder and avoiding the fire within the city. But also accommodation for travelers. Guest houses and inns were erected in all the islands. The idea was again to create a sort of network. So imagine to be a sailor, a fisherman, or whatever. You are crossing the lagoon, there is a storm, there is a problem with your boat. You have to be able to find a space to refuge. And these guest houses and inns were managed by the state, but actually, so they were paid by the state, but managed by the religious community. So again, there was this interlocking exchange between the secular activities and the religious activities. But the lagoon was also used for military purposes. So even though the idea of Venice was that the lagoon itself, so the waters around Venice were protecting the city, the Republic over the century has to create a series of fortified outposts in order to protect especially the principal entrances of the lagoon. So at the time, 5 inlets. Today we have only 3, the so-called Bocche da Porto. And so they erected forts, garrison, watchtowers. Here is a representation of the Porto di Malamocco with the 2 fortresses that were looking over the inlet. At the same time, the lagoon proved to be crucial also for the public health apparatus of the city. And we have unfortunately understood very well what this means in the past 3 years now. So from the beginning of the 15th century, 2 islands were transformed into permanent citadels for the healthcare. So the first 2 lazarettos in the world. The Lazaretto Vecchio that was founded in 1423 to care for the plague sick, and the Lazaretto Nuovo, established in 1468, that was actually used for quarantining both people and merchandise that were suspected to be sick. So even the differentiation between the 2 islands clearly revealed that there was a strategy around this territory. But the healthcare program of the Republic was much more intense than this and more far-reaching, because many other islands in time of crisis were transformed into lazarettos or places for fighting the pestilences. So, and it's impressive reading the decrees, the Senate decrees is really impressive, because thinking especially to what happened a few years ago, in like less than 3 days, sometimes entire communities of people were moved from an island to another in order to accommodate goods or people that were sick or contaminated. So the dynamism, the flexibility of this space was something absolutely incredible, especially if you compare what we have done a few years ago, in which was so long the procedure of just creating tents or new hospital, etc., that it's quite embarrassing, I would say. The lagoon was also the stage set on which the Republic promoted its glory and its power, also in terms of festivities, activities, parades, regatta. So it was a moment also of displaying the power of a very strategic environment and very peculiar environment. And also the islands were sort of embassies for the Republic. So it's foreign guests, important and dignitary guests like popes, kings, emperors, etc., who entered the city of Venice couldn't go directly to Venice. They had to stop first in some of the islands, according to their nationality. They need to stop there to have this sort of important moment that was called the accreditation. So it was a sort of control of passports. So some of the people from the Senate had to go there waiting for the guests, and then only when there was this official accreditation, these guests could actually enter the city of Venice and then go to the doors. So what is funny to me is to think that in like 5 centuries ago, if you mention the island of San Clemente to someone, most likely they wouldn't know what island was that. If you ask today about San Clemente or Santo Spirito, no one really knows where those islands are. Here are some of the islands that were used for the. Is there a problem with the microphone? Oh, they couldn't hear. Okay. So the idea of this lagoon is, to me, like a sort of series of pieces in a chessboard of a skilled player, because these islands were really used at the moment, so according to the needs of the Republic with different properties. So the idea is that how we can really communicate a story that has changed so much. If we're looking to this island now, there is really nothing. They are either abandoned, or the other possibility is that they have been sold, cheaply sold, unfortunately, to have like especially luxury hotels or private spaces, so they are not more accessible. So how can we really communicate? We can communicate. Okay. So the idea that I had is that, okay, we need to find a way in which we can blend together the reconstructional spaces that have changed so much with the story of all these activities that has been done. So the idea is to create an interactive 3D platform that will be accessible to scholars, to researchers, but also to the public through a web application. And the concept, the 4 scalar analysis are those that you are looking right now. So on one side, I would like really trying to recreate these spaces. So trying to reconstruct digitally what we have lost in terms of architecture, which is a lot, really. Imagine that all these islands had convents, monasteries, churches constructed by the major architects of the early modern period. So it's, for me, such a pity, and really, it's difficult sometimes. On the other side, what I would like to map is the supporting role of these islands. Again, for the activity that I mentioned again, so how really was used the space? How was the regulation between private and public areas? How many state infrastructure were located in this space? On a third level, I'm also interested in trying to understand from an European perspective how these islands shared or mitigated the major events of the Republic. What would that happen without the islands in the moment of the pestilences of the 16th century or the 18th century? What about if they hadn't the fortresses that really protected the city during the 17th century? So the idea of trying to enlarge the view, but also to look at the major events of the Republic through the lens of the island. And on a fourth level, trying to see also to retrieve islands also for the innovative forms of art and architecture that were displayed. Because in comparison to the city center, the restriction was, of course, less. So the major artists and architects were absolutely free to innovate, to create new forms of art that then circulated a lot through the agency of this religious community. So in terms also of a sort of lagoon artistic approach, I think that there's going to be so much to say. And in order to to describe all these four components of the research, the analytical methodology, let's say that it's quite, it requires a sort of source critical workflow that is made of different components, that is coupling the closed archive readings with the most advanced digital technology. Because on one side, we have, of course, the historical research. Without that, we would do not really nothing. But then we need a survey campaign, because most of these islands have not been measured yet. So we know really nothing about the space. And then we need to map the ancient cartography in order to understand how they were and how we can really combine the ancient drawings to the situation we have right now. And then we have the components of the 3D modeling, the HP modeling, and we will see what this means in order to try to represent also the elevation of these spaces. And all these different components will converge in a sort of flexible canvas. That is this infrastructure or platform that is a geospatial and time-based infrastructure. So it means that it's georeferenced in time and space. And it allows to integrate the spatial and digital reconstruction with all the information that are. So let's see some of these stats in order. So from the project really draws upon an extensive corpus of historical sources, either textual and iconographical sources. They range from the island's description, book of accounts, reports, inventories. So any text that is giving us information about these spaces over time. And then the iconographical sources, drawings, surveys, maps, engraving, and also for more recent times, area photographs, orthophotos. And all this extensive documentation, it can be classified into four main categories: the sources themselves that are giving us this information, the events that happen in these islands, the actors that were involved in these actions. They can be either private citizens, or religious communities, local offices, or whatever. And then the places themselves, of course. Those are the four, let's call them entities, that will be represented in the platform, in the infrastructure. And for the places, as I was saying, the problem is a little bit bigger, because unfortunately, as you see from these pictures, the islands have been transformed extensively over time. This is a representation of the island of San Secondo, which was really the prototype and the first experiment in this project. So the fact that they have been transformed so much, you see, the island today looks like a sort of atollo, circular with a circular shape, but till the mid-19th century, the shape was so the island was a sort of square, had a square shape, and was much smaller. So what can we do to contextualize the iconography that we found, or we are going to find in the archives? How we can really create a link between the documents and the contemporary situation? Because as an architectural historian, I tend to be very excited anytime I find a drawing. Of course, so you're so happy. Maybe it's an unpublished drawing and everything looked like great. But most of the time, this sort of excitement transforms into a sort of frustration when you cannot even understand how to look this map. So you don't even understand what's the north and south of this drawing. And I give you just a quick example. What you are looking right now is the island of Madonna del Monte in the northern lagoon. We are particularly lucky because we have a drawing of the mid-18th century that also present the measurements of the space in Venetian feet. More around the same period, we also have a view from Giacomo Guardi, so we can also understand these places how were in terms of the elevations. But if we look at the island right now, this is the situation. So we have an island that is completely different. It looks like a turtle, at least to me. And how can you relate this drawing to that island? I mean, even what the municipality is giving to us is not like it's not so helpful, because this is what they gave to us. There's not even the survey of the of the military battery of the island in the middle of the island. My idea is that they haven't measured it because there is no roof. So to their purposes, this is not a building because there is no roof. So this is what I have imagined. So the very first thing that we are going to do, and actually I've just appointed a researcher for doing this, is a surveying campaign. So we need to, thanks to the most advanced technologies for making survey, laser scanner, drones, and so on, we need to recognize a series of control ground points that we can associate with the drawing. In this case, you see that there are a series of like darker signs under the water. You see those? Those are algae. They are just deposited on top of the basement of what probably was the former perimeter of the island. So my idea, but we haven't been there yet, is that most likely the drawing needs to be georeferenced in this way. So if you see here the church and the well, actually were located where now we have this military building from the 20th century. But you understand how much these highlands have changed, how the process really needs to start from the current situation and then move back to the past. And this is exactly what we are doing for the GIS component. GIS, for those of you who don't know what is a very important tool for georeferencing maps, but also to connect the spatial information that we that derive from the cartography with the non-spatial, so the qualitative and quantitative information about a space. So the process right now, and this is again the island of San Secondo, so you see how much this island have changed. So this round shape is basically the result of the octagons that was created in the mid-19th century. Of course, the high and low tide has changed the contour of the islands, but actually the island had, till the very beginning of the 19th century, had this shape and all these buildings. And so during the French and especially the Austrian rules, they have raised basically to ground all the buildings. So the process for us is to collect all the iconographical sources that can be georeferenced, so basically maps and architectural drawings, reorder them chronologically, in order to have a series of sort of snapshots of all the different temporal phases. And then, thanks to the georeferencing tool, so basically creating some geometric transformations that allows us to associate some points that we can recognize in the reality with points that you can recognize in the map. So basically, we are assigning a well and precise coordinate system to the drawings. We can then reconstruct all the steps and the phases of these islands. But as you see, some of the temporal phases that we have chosen, and those are related to the fact to the cartography that we have basically. So you see, we are lucky because we have many more documents for the contemporary period, of course, even photographs and accurate surveys, and it's very difficult to find historical drawings and maps for the earlier period. Anyway, sometimes you are in a situation in which between two phases, there is a quite large time span. So the idea is that what we are doing, what we are looking right now are just sort of snapshots, sort of frozen moments of the islands in different periods. But there's not the possibility in looking to this reconstruction to understand how was the process of urban change and architectural change. What was the sequence of the action? So did they demolish the church first or another building? When was constructed, I don't know, the refectory in comparison to another building? So those snapshots are important for having an overview of the islands, but they are not really allowing us to understand the sequence of all these transformations. So we start with these sort of layers to move, thanks to the historical sources, all the other historical sources that are giving us information, more detailed information. So in this case, textual sources, other kind of iconographical drawings, like views, etc. So something that we cannot really georeference. I mean, it's not something that we can draw upon, but we can extract information about when a building was constructed or demolished. So leveraging on the two temporal phases that we have, we are going to associate to each single building the date parameters of its construction and demolition. So basically making the granularity much larger. And then, starting from the two-dimensional drawings, and thanks to the really extensive amount of sources that we have in terms of paintings, engravings, and views, we are also trying to reconstruct the elevations of these buildings with the so-called HB, so the historical BIM. This is a very particular kind of 3D modeling because it allows us not only to create 3D models, but also to have integrated models or interoperable models. So these models are basically embedded of all the information related to the buildings. And this information, these historical data are about, again, the construction and demolition dates, but also the function. Was that a public or a private building? What was the use of this space? Was that a religious building, military, and so on? The typology, a church, convent, refectory, etc. The people connected to that specific building, the event, economic, social, the artworks related to that. So all the information related to a specific building will be integrated into the model in order to allow us to answer some of the questions that I mentioned at the beginning. So what was the use of the space, the jurisdiction of the state or the private citizen within this island? Which were the social activities, the architectural solution that were used in these spaces, the exchange, and so on. And all this information are then collected into this sort of, as I call it, a flexible canvas that is the infrastructure. And I'm going to show you some of the mock-ups. As I said, or I don't know if I said or you said or we didn't say, that the project basically started a month and a half ago. So what we are looking right now are just some of the mock-ups. I mean, we are still in the process of developing this infrastructure, but this is why I'm also particularly happy to present this project, because it's the moment of having, for me, for having any comments, feedback, and suggestions. So for me, it's also important to understand how much this is working or not. So as you see, the infrastructure comes as a sort of stroll in the space, a virtual stroll in space and time. We resolved to use a very basic layout that reminds also common user about the large audience to the common web applications. I used to call it like sort of historical Google Maps, because the layout is centered around a map, a base map, so representing the lagoon today. We have also the possibility to switch between the regular OpenStreetMap to the satellite views and so on, so according to what you prefer. This map is constrained by a timeline and also the zoom level. So with this red color, what you're going to see is the shape of the lagoon. So the digital reconstruction of the shape of the lagoon in the year that you are selecting in the time slider here. So the timeline is basically allowing you to move across the centuries, while the zoom is allowing you to move across the lagoon. And so superimposed on the base map, you're going to see the ancient morphology of the lagoon at that time. Here we have the so-called navigator. Exactly like in Google Maps, you have a list of restaurants, bars, activities, etc. Here you're going to have all the entities that I mentioned at the beginning. So the textual, iconographical source, the actors, the events, places, bibliographic item, related to what you are looking in terms of zoom level and in terms of chronology that you selected. So in this case, we are zoomed on the entire lagoon in the year 1550. And so here you're going to have all the information about, again, all these entities. And then, of course, you can zoom to a very specific island or even to a building. In this case, we selected a building. We moved to the year 1670. And here we're going to have all the information about the church around that year. Not exactly the same year. I mean, when you pick a date here, you're going to have exactly that specific moment. For the navigator, I decided to open up a little bit the boundaries, because it might be that in that specific year you cannot have a source or any event or you don't know an event at that time. So I decided to increase the boundaries for the navigator 20 years before and 20 years after the date that the user selected. You can then click on a specific document and you're going to have all the metadata connected to it. So the information about the archival location, the synopsis, the transcription, etc. You can also choose, we are working to create some narratives, so a sort of preset queries that we are preparing in order to guide the user across a very specific topic. In this case, the food and water supply. So there will be some information about the buildings that were used for this purpose. One of the components that I really felt the need to have was also to have the possibility to see the documents that were used as the foundation for this research. The idea is that you can, this is actually a screenshot because there is a trial that maybe if there is time, I'm going to show you of the infrastructure. So this is the component we have worked the most till now. So having the possibility to contextualize the maps that were used for the georeferencing procedure. So here you have a list of all the documents. You can drag and drop the maps. You can also modify the transparency. You can compare a map to another. And also you can create your own thematic map. So because we have, anytime we are vectorializing and so drawing the shapes, the contours of the buildings in the past, we are associating a specific attribute. So a qualitative information like the use of the space, the typology of the building, etc. You can also here with the color and the label change the color, so again, the labels of the building. So you can create your own map and then you can export it and use for your own purposes. So the idea is to open the floor to regarding the methodology, but also to allow people to use this material. Finally, the most fancy part, of course, that is going to be the more difficult. I mean, we already activated the functionality of moving into a 3D, exactly like in Google Maps. You can switch to the 3D component. In this case, you will see the lagoon and also all the 3D models that we are going to construct. So this is again the island of San Secondo. If we move back, the island at the end of the 18th century was like this. So the idea is that we are going to upload into the platform also the 3D models in which you can again, select any specific building and see the characteristics and the functions of this building, the typology. So the idea is really to blend together the physical components with all the information that me and the other researchers in my team are finding. This is the very last piece. I mean, in some cases, this is the prototype that we started with the island of San Secondo. In some cases, we have been particularly lucky because I also found an inventory about an account book with the restoration, the works of restoration from the 18th century that was testifying to even the color that were used to paint the walls, the external walls. So we also try to create a photorealistic 3D model. But again, even in 3D, you could move to the sources that were important and are connected to the building. Because, and I close with this, I really think that as a historian, and I used to write books, essays, all this information about the document that you have used, the events, are normally buried just in footnotes. Footnotes that no one is reading, at least me. So the idea was really finally to make this material accessible and try to create a link between what we are reading and something that is more difficult to represent, so something that we have lost in terms of cultural heritage. So this is all for me. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much. So this is really fascinating project, and so your closing remarks bring back to life the contents of the footnotes. This is really a extremely useful enterprise that fits to our double identity digital tools for public use or for open up academic content and knowledge to a wider public, and making this accessible. So there is now room for discussion, questions. So this is an interdisciplinary seminar for students, for advanced scholars, for lay people, layperson. So there are no stupid questions. So really to clarify vocabulary or have questions, have suggestions. So this is, you still can save the seminar, the project from failure. So if you have a good suggestion how to deal with this extremely complex amount of data and sources, that's all very welcome. We have archaeologists here, art historians, philologists, historians. So I think there's interest from many directions here regarding this project. So also thank you very much everyone who posted comments, links, questions in the chat. So I will try to follow. If someone from external has a question, please drop a note in the chat, and then I can either read or you can get the microphone unmuted and ask your questions, and the others here from the room. And I hope the communication works here with our technology. So that's the first time with this new setup. So
also in the meantime, open the trial of the platform if someone has
wonderful.
So
can you
the stage?
You can paste the link maybe in the chat. So
this is not accessible for the public yet. At least you have a sense of the stage in which we are with the base maps here. So again, we can move from one base map to another.
This is an island where you pass on the Via della Libertà.
Exactly. Here is the railway bridge, and here is the island. Here is the layer with the building, so we can turn on and off the building. What I was saying about the granularity is the fact that here, if we move in with the timeline, let's move to, you see that buildings are changing. Let me zoom in a little bit. Without a mouse, that's difficult for me. You see that buildings are moving according to the year, to a very specific year. Something is changing from in this case, in 1833, the islands that was here in the middle has already been demolished while other buildings were still existing. We can then, in this case, look at the island when it was an octagon in the year 1945. Again, we can also use some fancy tools in order to compare the island with the spyglass or with the swipe tool that I don't like particularly, but sometimes can be. So I'm really terrible without a mouse. Let me see if I can move. Okay, here you can create a comparison. Nothing has changed so much from the, but let's move to this document, for instance. Let me turn off the buildings. If we compare the situation here, oh, sorry, the swipe is here. Okay, you see the difference between the island right now. We can also modify the transparency back to normal. You see the difference between the two islands. So this is more or less what we are doing. And in the control panel, let's turn this off. No, maybe this is on, and I'm gonna use the line map rather than. Okay, and if we activate the shape files, we can also decide to color the function public and private with two different colors. You can also decide to pick a stronger color for the two. Let's say gray here. The buildings in this case, you can also decide to label the buildings according to their typology. So the church in the middle, the loggia, the kitchen, and so on. So this is more or less the stage on which we are. Then we have the components for the database with all the forms for the entering the metadata, but it's something that is less interesting. Okay, sorry, I took a few other moments just because I forgot to show you the trial.
We have a question from Sarah Lantos via our Zoom participants. So if you want to unmute yourself, Sarah, and read or elaborate your question. If that
sure. I wasn't sure what is the best method to do here, so I also typed in the chat. But thank you for the lecture. It was amazing. I really enjoyed it. It sounds like a very cool project. I'm an underwater archaeologist, so my question is, were there any underwater surveys or excavations done around these islands? Because I'm sure you could find some of the walls or even like the reef or the edge of the island buried under the sand that could add something to these pictures and models. And also underwater photogrammetry and photographs could be incorporated maybe. That would look amazing, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely, especially for the survey, we're going to do some photogrammetric photogrammetry for semi-submerged architecture. For the excavation, this is more difficult because none of us is an archaeologist. But what I forgot to say and to mention, it was actually important. I really hope that this infrastructure is a sort of backbone and a skeleton also for integrating other projects. Of course, I decided to start with the early modern period, so the 16th century, because first of all, I'm a modernist, early modernist, but also because that was the moment for me in which I had cartography, in which as I said, the lagoon was structured in a very specific way. But there are many studies of the lagoon in terms of archaeology. And so many projects, even here in Caposcari, that are working on some of these islands. So I really hope that this infrastructure can be also linked to them, finding a way, and I'm working on this to make sure that there is a notariality. So everyone is it's clear where the data comes from. And so I really want to share and open this infrastructure also for making other projects more visible, maybe. So it's really an open invitation to anyone who wanna join this project, also as an external collaboration. But for sure, having excavation would be fantastic. I don't know if you have noticed when I was showing the survey, some of the images when we went to San Secondo to do the survey, we found, because we went there when there was really the low tide, and we found even pieces of architecture there, so like a capitol, an entablature. There were pieces that were just left there because most likely in the moment in which the Austrian decided very quickly in 1848 during the revolution to transform the island into an octagons for military purposes, they probably just demolished the buildings without even reusing the pieces. So there's going to be much to say on these islands before all of them are going to be sold, because this is my major fear. Some of them are already in the market. For one of these, the Madonna del Monte, for 300,000 euros. So the price of a small apartment in Padua. So it's just incredible to me. So before having all of them sold, I hope that there's going to be the possibility to do excavations. So that would be fantastic, really.
Yeah, very nice. Well, if you need an underwater archaeologist, happy to join.
Thank you. Thank you. We keep that in mind.
Well, we have a question here from the room. One question, yeah, please.
Elena Velosi. Thank you for a great talk. I would like to hear a little bit more about your team and how you put together your team and how you, this is obviously an incredible amount of work and from a variety of points of view and expertise, and not only in terms of the research, but also in terms of the creating the platform that you just showed us. So I was wondering how you put together the team and how's the team working on the variety of different areas, and also how you created the platform. I'm assuming this is a new platform that you're just creating for this project.
Okay. Thank you so much for the question. So the team is quite large. Some of them have already been accredited, some came later, already 5 years. So there is a postdoc that is dealing with the survey, and of course I have also a lab that is helping her in house basically. For 2 years, I have architectural historian, actually 2 architectural historians. There's going to be 2 PhD, one working on monastic architecture, the other one working on art and the preservation of the artistic production in these churches, the works of art that were preserved in these churches and monasteries. Then I have a 3D modeler here working in Padua. I just appointed him. Then there's going to be in the 3rd year a person working on the Isolari, so the Book of Islands, trying also to see how the Republic represented itself through a very specific genre like the Book of Islands. I have 2 people, 2 developers working on the infrastructure. They are based at VeDPH, so in Florence, the Harvard University Center on Italian Renaissance art. We decided to adopt a so-called semantic platform. So they are working with this blaze graph. So it's not a relational database. It's something that is much bigger because it allows to use open link data to connect this information with the online vocabularies, first of all. And this is particularly important because it allows to connect to other projects that are mentioning a specific island, a specific architect, any information that we are entering. So all the data that are mapped and contained in this blaze graph are actually related to a physical object that is recognized with an ID that relates to an online vocabulary. The idea of using a blaze graph, so working with the so-called free polls, allows us to create much more queries than a regular relational database, because it's not just about relating 2 different tables, but it's it gives the possibility to create any sort of query, like I want to see in my map all the bell towers that were constructed in this period for the Benedictine order. So the possibility to connect all the information about a building that has been mapped with an attribute that says the Benedictine community was there from this year to this year. The fact that you have the typology that is bell tower and so on allows you to create a series of very complex queries that is actually not possible to do with the regular databases. We started using a platform, a Blaze graph that was created, that is called Research Space, that was created by the British Museum. And we are basically building on that and creating the geospatial component, because the British Museum constructed this infrastructures for research space with the idea of mapping their collections. So there was no geospatial component. So we are starting from there and developing with the two developers the component for the maps, for the digital reconstructions, 2D and 3D models and so on. So it's a big team of 10 people, and so it's going to be a long way for 5 years. So thank you.
So we're playing ping pong here with the audience external. So there's Matthias Müller from our Zoom participants. Yeah, please, Matthias.
Hi, Matthias, interaction designer, time traveler, calling from Hamburg. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation of this project. I'm a little bit confused. First question, you mentioned this project is on the way for a couple of months, and you said you have a postdoc for 5 years. So it's plenty of external components. So when did this project really start? I don't believe that it's just a couple of months. It's so wonderful. It's more than that, right?
So this project was awarded a year ago. Then it was in a sort of incubator for more than a year for bureaucratic reasons. In the meantime, I was able to work with the assistance of these two developers at Itati. At the time, I was already working at Itati, so we had the possibility to begin, even though the project hasn't really started yet. So it was not paid by the European community, but we started more or less a year ago.
Yeah, that makes it still tremendous effort. My second question is more the architecture. So history stuff is really fuzzy and uncertain. How do you propagate new findings? If you have to move, for example, an island, do you have to do everything again that follows from this new insight? So all the vectors and all the 3D models and all the renderings, do you have a button that says update now, or do you have nothing new, please?
No, that is a very interesting and very detailed question, but absolutely right. So the GIS, we are working with QGIS. It's an open source tool for mapping. It's connecting to an extension that is called Postgres. So it's a database. So anytime we are modifying something in QGIS, this automatically relates to our platform. So any modification is going to be linked immediately to the database and the infrastructure. For the 3D models, we decided to use the HVAM system rather than the regular 3D modeling in AutoCAD, for instance, because this is a parametric technique. So you are not modifying just drawing the lines, but you are entering some parameters. So if at some point you find that the windows were 5 instead or 6, you're gonna just remove. And the fact that we are building the different phases on the same model, so basically the same model will have some other details like the windows, the doors, the roof, etc. in a single model that then has the characteristic about the data parameters, allows you to just turn on and off the element and to modify the time span, the measurements and so on. So everything is going to be much quicker than what we did as group visualizing Venice in the past. So basically we had several copies of the same building, and anytime you found something different, you had to modify the element in 7 models. So this is why we move on a little bit, and we finally decided to have the parametric modeling, and so using Revit and so.
Okay, thank you.
But if you have any other suggestions, please. I'm here to listen.
Just pointing out the challenges right now. I have some more questions, but I'll leave room for the others right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a room here from the audience. Yeah.
Okay.
If you can please shout, because or you repeat maybe the questions. It's difficult to understand from outside.
I'll try.
Okay.
So first of all, many thanks for this insightful speech and congratulations, because this is quite of a project. I have actually 2 questions. The first one is related to what the previous speaker said. Yeah, and is about how will you map the levels of uncertainty in the building restoration? I mean, because one of the main problems with virtual restoration and the reconstruction is that sometimes the 3D model is thought to be the main one, while it's just an hypothesis, and we can develop different hypotheses. So, do you think about something for showing the level of certainty when building these 3D models? And the second question is about when you talk about Venice as an holistic system made of different pieces, it made me think about this volume by Francesco Sansovino, which is Venice Bellissima et Singolare, and that presented the idea of Venice that the city wanted to convey to the outside world as an holistic system when politics, ethics, the society is intertwined. And I really appreciate when you said that Venice is not only made of stones and buildings, which is the current, I think, idea of Venice as a monumental city. But what about people that live in Venice, lived in Venice? So also I was wondering if the topic of the Venetian identity and its constructions, so the myth of Venice and how the Venetian perceive themselves as a human system. I mean, do you think about putting this problem within the project or not? Thank you again.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I don't know if they have, so people from Zoom have heard the 2 brilliant questions, really. So, so with the second one, it was about the identity. So this idea of Venice, like an holistic city. Yes, it's definitely part of the project. It's, as I was saying, there's going to be a person working, for instance, on the Isolari. So the way in which these islands were represented, but also you mentioned Francesco Sansovino. You are absolutely right, because he's also describing the churches and the monuments, the palaces in the islands. So his description is not just related to Venice, but it's also related to the islands. And what I really find fascinating in this descriptions, or especially in the Book of Islands, is that so the Book of Islands are presenting several series of islands over the world. So you have like the islands of Greece, the islands of Malta, the islands of Spain, etc. When they come to Venice, they don't call that like the islands of Venice. They call it the city of Venice. But the representation is the city with all the islands around. So the idea was that Venetians at that time were considering themselves as an archipelago, something that unfortunately we have completely lost. So the fact, and even when you read the paper documents in the State Archive, they are mentioning some of these islands without even specifying that it's an island. So they say, okay, we need to go to Santo Spirito, we need to go to San Clemente. They are not even saying the island of etc. because it was really a sprawl territory on the water, but completely connected. So I think that these pieces will appear very clearly also in the platform, because having some functions located only on the islands and not in the city center will make more clear the fact that it was a network of activity and people were moving to this island quite frequently to go there for the agricultural activities, for all the functions that were not related to the city. The first question, so what it was about the
level of
the uncertainties. She was asking how we are going to manage the problem of uncertainty, which is something absolutely important. And we Visualizing Venice group, we dealt with it for quite a long time. This is going to be fixed and solved using different representation, different layouts, especially using transparencies when you are not sure about part of a building, especially the roof. The roof is something that we have most of the time we have no information about. So we are gonna move from what we did in the past, so using a flat roof. So as we were in Greece, for instance, at some point we had these models in which it really looked like we were in Greece with all these flat roofs. We're going to do some hypotheses, and this is about using different colors, a different representation in order to allow people to understand this is just an hypothesis. And as an architectural historian, I must say that it's very difficult sometimes to expose yourself in this case. So you need when you're writing a book, you're not sure about something, you can just omit it. You're not going to say how it was, you're not saying anything, and so you're safe. In this case, the fact that you are forced to make a decision, and in order to make this decision, you need to compare that building with other buildings from the same time period or same area, and so on. So it's an exercise also for you to think, thanks also to the digital tools, because the fact that you can associate these documents to the visual representation of the space, it's helping you also to make these choices. So it's important for me to try to do the exercise of moving a little bit further, even if you're not sure, even if it's just an hypothesis, without making clear that this is, of course, an hypothesis. And it's good also because I imagine and envision this platform as a sort of big and open forum. So again, we are working on doing the possibility, having a component that allows for comments. Not, of course, the possibility to modify our products, but at least to leave comments and suggestions, because I hope that maybe an historian who is the most expert on that building, on that topic, etc., can say, well, I found this document that says that this building was different, or it was constructed in a different time period. For me, it would be fantastic, because I'm quite bored about so many projects in Venice that they are not in contact with each other. And to me, I'm so absolutely happy if this platform can be open also for other scholars to really create a dialogue. So
Thank you.
So thank you.
I have a little follow-up question. So, do you imagine this resource as a living resource where people contribute? I mean, how to moderate and manage this data? Because, I mean, the project will have an end in 5 years, and there are so many people working on the lagoon, on Venice, and the islands. There's such an interest because there's so much fascination about it. So people will add knowledge and create new knowledge about all these beautiful places, and how to maintain these resources alive and up to date to some extent, because so a book is then published, and that's the state of the art of a certain day. But this is a digital resource which has also the potential to grow, huh? And then to add information in all these categories. I mean, one could create also a citizen science application, but that's a project in its own right, probably. So what is your plan?
That is a tough question, I might say, in the sense that I don't have an answer yet. Of course, my hope is that the project will continue also after the 5 years of the project. Maybe I won't be involved anymore. I will move to something else. Maybe in 5 years I will be completely fed up of it. I have no idea. Anyway, the problem of the maintenance of these projects is something that I think, a problem we are all dealing in terms of digital humanity. My hope, of course, is to find new financial sources to make the project still available later. The fact that we decided to have to host even the server and all the entire infrastructure in Harvard is sort of reassurance about the fact that this will be available in the future. We are really trying to understand how to deal with other people who want to join in terms of also doing part of this activity. So if they have a model, if they want to modify something, of course, we cannot really just give the credentials enter the platform and do, because there is also very specific methodology, also in terms of the workflow of the activity. But at least trying to open a sort of forum chat in which people can contact us and then case by case see how to move. This is the very first step. It's not enough. I'm so really aware of this, but I think this is a common problem, especially how to make these projects available in the future and growing in the future. Problem is, of course, of financial resources, as usual. So that is something that I hope that in 5 years from now I can find another solution, but if you have one again.
I mean, that's an issue for all these digital projects that create these rich resources on topics that are so broad. So I mean, if you had a solution, then everyone has.
I mean, my hope is that, and I'm working in this, is to involve in this project also the municipality.
Yeah.
So I think that this is a tool that would be very important also for architects, restorer, etc., because they would have a platform in which, I mean, I'm dealing with the historical data, but you can enter here information about the environment, the algae, the high and low tide, bathymetric data, any architectural, urbanistic information. So if I'm able to catch their attention and to make sure that they can be interested in being part of this, maybe they're going to continue this work. I mean, if I can create a skeleton of this, and then we will continue also thanks to their help, that would be fantastic. But working with the local institution is not always easy, so we are also really trying to move on with that.
Yeah. More questions here from the audience, but I think so. Institutional collaboration is key. I mean, you can't just continue yourself or
I mean, maybe you can find a financial support for another 2 or 3 years, but after 3 years, you will have the same problem. So you need someone who is going to be stable, so an institution that is stable, who can be interested in keeping this information available.
Matthias has another question from home, please.
In terms of longevity and sustainability, so that you have a future for your project, I think it's quite important that it gets interwoven with other projects. And therefore my question is for you to elaborate a little bit more on the input and output formats that you support. So can I have a coordinate and year and Zoom level and jump into your project from anywhere in the world, to other website? And what kind of stuff do you export for researchers and other platforms?
Okay, so we are now creating the possibility to save basically the URL of your query. So imagine that you have work on so you have created all your queries, your zoom level, you have turned on an historical map, etc. So you're fine with that. You can save your URI and then open it whenever you want, because it's basically registering all the information, the different information. So you can open it even a few days after, and you're gonna jump up to examine that. In terms of the thematic maps, I think that it will be just downloadable as PNG and JPEG files, not the models. I think that it will be impossible to download the models. I have to think about that. For sure, what I can say is that you could not download the high resolution images from the historical sources. So the Venice State Archive, the Korean museums, we're working on creating all the memorandum of understanding to make their material available and visible on the platform. But you could, they are not happy with the idea of downloading also the historical materials. Maybe you could download them. Again, we are in a sort of negotiation in a, like not a high resolution with a watermark, but I mean, it would be at least something. The fact that you can see the documents is, for me, it's enough. I mean, if they are readable, if you can see the maps and good quality of the screen, it's already wonderful. So for the model, I think it would be a bit difficult to imagine to have them downloadable, but I need to think about that. Maybe we can export an OBJ file or.
I'd like to support your Venice projects with links from my project Chronoscope into yours. So I'd like to get hold on your URL schema.
That is fantastic news. Now, we will be in touch for sure.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Grazie mille.
Yeah.
Excellent. So there's a lot of praise in the chat. We save the chat
Thank you.
maybe we share it also via our YouTube recording if our bright students manage to make the post processing. If there are no further questions, I mean, we went beyond 6:30, and we definitely will have to have an aperitivo.
That sounds like a brilliant idea.
So that was lots of input, and thank you very much, Ludovica, for this very impressive demonstration of a very ambitious project. So it's a real ERC project.
I know that it's quite ambitious.
So I think you deserve another applause. For any suggestion. Collaboration is already in place. So excellent. So that's perfect. Thank you very much. Our next seminar is, if I manage to switch quickly, otherwise Stefano, can you 20th of March, 22 of March, and we will have a guest from.
I think it's yes. I do not remember the show.
Where is my browser? Okay, check the website. So here, the 22nd March, Federica Maietti from University of Ferrara, digital innovation for cultural heritage, knowledge and management. I think she's from a digital art history background from Ferrara, and yeah, so please watch the spot, follow our announcement in the social media channels, and yeah, get in contact and subscribe to or apply for membership or affiliation. Then you get also our newsletter or informal emails from myself or anyone who has something to share with members and friends of the center. So thank you very much. Have a good evening and enjoy the rest of the week. And yeah, thank you again, Ludovica.
Thank you so much for coming.
Okay,
for the trust.
cool.
Bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye, everyone.